Okay, Joyce, you said to call if I ever needed to talk. But if I tell you what I've been going through, you'll think I'm crazy. And I'd have to agree with you.
Sick, dizzy, lightheaded, weak in the knees. That's how many people feel after stepping off of a roller coaster.
When we feel that way, we're not surprised. We know roller coasters are designed to produce those feelings. And when you go through the process of grief, you shouldn't be surprised that you'll go through a roller coaster of emotions. In fact, you'll experience some of the same physical feelings: disorientation, fear, nausea. You get the idea.
Hi, I'm David, and this is my wife, Nancy. When you're grieving, you experience feelings and behave in ways you normally wouldn't. And since the death of a loved one is a devastating experience, you shouldn't be surprised when you feel depressed, confused, sick, or lonely.
Today, we want to help you understand which reactions to the death of a loved one are normal and which ones aren't. And along the way, we'll give you some suggestions to help you hold on till this ride stops.
Welcome to Grief Share.
Let's look at the common responses to the death of a loved one. We'll start with denial.
Denial is sort of a buffer, in a way, of helping us move into the reality of the death gradually.
You know, I was in such denial in the beginning. I didn't want to leave my house. I was afraid to leave my house for fear that my son would come home and I would miss him.
It sounds funny to say it, but I thought that she was just away at the hospital. And I just knew that the phone was going to ring. And I'm just as sane as any other person, but I knew that the phone was going to ring and that the doctors were going to call me in Dallas, where she was at, and say, okay, we've had her for 2 or 3 months, and she's doing better now, and you can come and get her. I mean, that's how much of a denial and in shock I was in.
And even the day that he was buried, I felt like that. This is not the way it is. And even now, I have a hard time believing it. And then it comes right down to the nitty-gritty. You've got to accept it.
When park visitors ride a roller coaster, they lose change, hats, keys, and other personal items.
As you ride the roller coaster of grief, you may think you're losing your mind.
I would do stupid things. I would be coming home and thinking I'm on X street, and I'd take a left off that, and then I'd realize, well, I'm on the wrong street. I shouldn't have gotten off. I was on the right street to begin with.
I guess my ability to concentrate was affected. I had to really focus in on being focused.
One of the other problems is that the person that you lost, the one that you love the most, they sort of dominate your mind. You have these obsessive thoughts about them. When you're conscious, and even when you're asleep, you dream about them, you think about them, and sometimes you'd like to, in a sense, not have them there, sort of give them an eviction notice, but they're there.
In addition to concentration problems, you may hallucinate or think you hear or see your loved one.
Many people won't admit to these experiences, but rest assured, it is normal.
The hallucinations would come and go. One of my hallucinations had to do with a recall to her childhood when she was just a little tyke. And she was in the hospital and she was calling out to me to come get her. Daddy, come get me. Do something for me, Daddy. And I got to tell you, it was a traumatic experience, and one that frankly left me shaken.
Some people who are grieving experience memory loss.
I came back to school to lecture, and I couldn't remember FDR. I knew I couldn't say the man's name, and there I am in front of 500 students, and I'm lecturing, and that man's name escapes me. So I had to say the president during the Depression. I covered up. But I walked over here at church, and I saw Hoover Edwards, who was a dear friend for years and years and years. And I could say good morning, but I couldn't say his name.
We're building a house, and we had to meet with the cabinet man. We drove together. When we were finished, she took off without me and left me and didn't even know she left me behind. But that was...
It was almost 3/4 of an hour later, I realized his car was home, and I thought, oh, well, he must have just went into the garage for some stock of some sort. And then I got thinking, I thought, oh my word.
Gradually, my memory did come back. And it wasn't completely gone. I mean, I could, but there were a lot of people that I just simply could not say their name.
Roller coaster rides can cause your heart to race, give you shortness of breath, and lead you to break out into a sweat.
The roller coaster of grief also affects you physically.
Like I say, I started having heart palpitations, skipping heart. And when I went to the doctor, he put me through all the stress tests, and he said, well, I don't find anything wrong. He said, I just think it's probably what you've just been through. And of course, I had to cry in his office. That was terrible.
You may be physically exhausted, just very, very tired, and that's normal. Or you may be full of energy, just don't know what to do with yourself, just running from one place to the other, just needing to do something because you don't want to sit still. Part of not wanting to be still is not wanting to have to confront or deal with the loss. Because when you're being still, you have to acknowledge that the person that you love is not there beside you. A person may experience tension in their upper back and in the neck area, may have headaches. And sometimes people will say that your head aches from thinking too much, and that can be true. Because when you're dealing with grief and loss, there's so many things you have to think about, and just that much activity in your brain can just wear you out and really do give you a headache. It's not the time to try to take aspirins or medications or things like that. But when you're experiencing a grief headache, you really want to rest because your mind is on overload, your body is on overload, and you need to lay your body down and allow it to replenish itself. Because when you're resting, your body heals, and it gives you the energy that you need when you get back up to be able to process all the different things that are going on. A person may also have stomach aches or upset stomachs, feeling like your food is not really settling. Everything just kind of feels queasy, and that's part of why they don't want to eat, because they don't feel like anything is going to actually settle. Sometimes people have vomiting spells just from the nausea, not able to keep anything down.
And then when it comes to sleep, there's a real battle. You have difficulty falling asleep. You might sleep for an hour, you wake up, you can't get back to sleep, and you get up in the morning feeling as though I'm just totally exhausted. And then when you do get to sleep, the dreams turn into nightmares. And the nightmares usually have death themes.
And so all these things are considered normal, and they're not the types of things that you need to actually go to the hospital for. You don't need to run to emergency if you're experiencing these. If it becomes excessive, you do want to mention it to someone, but these things and just kind of random experiences are normal things to expect.
Since grief affects you physically, it's important for you to monitor your health.
We're much more susceptible to catching the flu, catching the cold, and we have to be sure that we take care of ourselves.
I think it's also important to know that there is a danger within the first couple years after being widowed of your own failing health or death.
I mean, it was not too long after Jack died that somebody said to me, you really ought to just go in and have a physical and just talk to your doctor. And I did that, and because I'd had some dramatic weight loss, and that's not unusual either dramatic weight loss or gain or whatever is not unusual. And, so he did a general test, and there was nothing particular, but, my stress level was pretty high, and he just made some suggestions, and he also told me I could keep drinking my coffee, which I felt guilty about, and so he relieved some guilt, and that was good. So things like that you need to try to do as soon as you can.
When you're on a roller coaster, you experience a wide range of emotions at the same time. For example, you can feel both excitement and fear.
And when you grieve the death of a loved one, you can feel anger, relief, sadness, and regret, sometimes at the same time. This is exhausting and confusing, but again, this is normal.
H. Norman Wright refers to this emotional state as a tangled ball of emotions, a description you can probably relate to.
There are so many different emotions and feelings that we have. The tangled ball of emotions, the ball of grief that we've used for years, everyone goes through. And so it's important that we have this ball of grief, and if we wonder, what's going on? I go to it and say, dismay and panic. That's what I'm experiencing now.
I think the toughest part of dealing with that tangled ball of emotions is it's never one emotion that comes at a time. I think that was the toughest part, that it was never, for a while, it was never a single emotion.
The first thing that I felt was anguish, and then sadness, and then depression. And I think those lingered more than anything else.
I couldn't understand why this happened. I was angry, I was depressed, I was fearful, I was elated, I was everything.
Don't edit and don't censor what you're feeling. First of all of those kinds of feelings, those very powerful feelings are normal, and they won't hurt you. Like, the feelings won't kill you. So you don't need to be afraid of them. But you need to let your feelings sort of search you. Let the feelings expose kind of the questions of your soul, so that you know exactly what you need to be bringing to the Lord and asking for help with.
While grieving, you may experience surprising emotions.
One of these is anger toward the person who died.
One of the angers that I've been going through is angry at my husband, because of the situation because he went the night flying that he did. It was foggy weather. It wasn't foggy at the time, but it had been foggy days before. He'd had some problems with his flying then, getting to the right place because of the weather. And I often say, why did you go? Because it's like trying to put the blame on him, but yet I know that he went because he was doing his job and he was providing for his family. So there has been some anger there, and I'm still dealing with that anger.
Your anger may also be directed at God.
This stems from the belief that God was wrong to allow your loved one to die.
Oh, I had that anger, great anger for God. I would spend hours and hours in the hospital meditating by her bedside, reading prayer book. Every prayer book that was brought to me, I read it. I pored over it. And I would think, if God can answer anybody's prayers, He can answer mine. And after, when things continued to decline and get worse, and I thought, this isn't happening. Why, God? Why are you allowing this to happen? And then afterwards, I also went through not wanting anything to do with faith. But somehow, God has come back and tapped on my shoulder, and somehow it's, I've been able to put things in perspective and see that God would not want any ill to come on anybody.
Relief and joy are two surprising emotions of grief. And while many people feel them, they hesitate to admit it.
If you sense relief or joy, remember, it's not a sign that you didn't care deeply for your loved one.
There is that lifting of the burden off of your back. But this is one of the feelings that people begin to feel guilty about. I shouldn't feel that, but yet it's very, very normal. It doesn't mean that you didn't love them, but it meant that there is that change in your life at this time, and it's okay to feel the relief for yourself as well as the release for them.
She was terminal for 3 years, so there was a big release. I mean, even the selfish part of me was glad that I didn't have all of that responsibility.
Do I have advice for people who feel guilty for feeling relief? Be real. And I know that in my case, during Mom's last few months, I was really begging the Lord to give Mom a ticket home. So He answered my prayers.
During grief, some people get upset with God and move away from Him, but others draw closer to Him.
While everyone's grief is different, it's always best to move toward God, even if you don't understand why He allowed you to experience such pain.
For me, it was so important that I continued to practice the spiritual disciplines that I knew that kept me close to God. Even when I didn't feel that it made a difference, to still stay in His Word, to still pray, to still write to Him how I was feeling. It was too scary for me not to, because I knew that he was the only one that was going to be able to heal me and get me through it.
Once your loved one is gone, something little like setting a table with one less place can be really hard. Going to get the mail and seeing that letter addressed to your loved one, driving to church alone. So many things that once were easy are all of a sudden hard. And that means that we really have to get to know God better, because we're going to have to pray, Lord, help me set the table. Lord, help me go get the mail. Lord, help me drive to church. All these things that we did without thinking are now just as hard as those big things that we used to pray about. So it's a chance to get to know God better and become more intimate with Him. And if we do that, we'll be able to get by all these difficult little tasks.
As we walked away from burying our daughter Hope, I remember telling Nancy, I think I expected our faith would make this hurt less, but it didn't.
Dr. Ed Welch explains that faith doesn't guarantee good feelings. It sustains us in their absence.
Well, it's a myth for us to say that faith simply is happiness. Okay? Faith is somehow a light-hearted confidence in God. Faith, true faith, is expressed in the shadows, okay? In this valley of the shadow of death, when we can't see our God clearly, and we say, Lord, I trust you, but help me to trust you, because the loss still feels like it's going to overwhelm me.
Unpredictable emotions, exhaustion, and the fear that you're losing your mind can cause you to want to seek relief.
There are many healthy ways to seek relief.
As the experience of grief is not the same in everybody, the experience of comfort isn't as well.
And so you just need to take one thing at a time and think about some of the things that you would normally do to reduce stress. Things like relaxing, taking soaks, or taking long showers.
Perhaps for one person, the thing that comforts me most is to know that there are people who are praying for me. They don't need to be with me. There are other people who don't want to be left alone. I'm that type of person. I'm my most social when I'm struggling. I want to be around people. There are people who want truths to hang on to. And those truths are like handholds for them to grab a hold of.
Another thing I found very helpful was just kind of taking a break and getting away from everything, going out for a nice walk, going to the beach, just sitting and watching the waves roll in, going to the mountains.
And I played music constantly, and I remember playing, you know, I'm Going Home, B.J. Thomas's song, and, you know, just till my children said, Mother, does that have to be on the radio forevermore? And I said, yes, it has to be there until I'm through with it.
Continue to find new things that you enjoy, because despite life won't ever be the same, being different doesn't necessarily mean it's not joyful.
I want to ask the question, what are the things in the last couple of weeks that I found the most comforting? Go there. And thank God that He's provided those resources for you.
Another way to relieve your pain is to look at the cards you received when your loved one died. And if you have one, you may even want to look at a video of the funeral.
While initially this may cause you more pain, eventually it will bring healing.
We would really recommend that you look at a lot of the memorabilia, including sympathy cards, while you're in the process of grieving, because it is one form to both remember all the caring people around you that really were there when you were initially grieving, but it also is a great trigger for some emotions. And even though it may be that you're saying, but why would I want to do that? Why would I want to recreate pain? We would be saying to you that recreating pain, feeling those feelings, is really ultimately what helps with healing. And that if you avoid the pain, you will avoid working your way through grief. You know, something else about sympathy cards is that they often have very wonderful verses, some scriptural references, some very comforting things that I found myself as I was looking through them. I would give myself the assignment to do it every few months, that I would maybe cut out something that was very meaningful, a verse or a poem, and put it on my refrigerator or put it someplace that I would see it. When it comes to the funeral tape, a lot of times people are so inundated with shock and numbness initially that they may not remember much of the funeral events, and that hopefully things were said that were very meaningful and helpful to them about their deceased loved one, but also about what God will do, how He will walk with them in their grieving, as well as many funerals have opportunities for other people to get up and say a few things about the deceased loved one that really are heartwarming for the widowed person.
Journaling is another good activity.
Getting your thoughts on paper helps you clear your mind and take inventory of the losses you're grieving.
What is so missed by most widowed people is the ability to talk with somebody who really cares about the little things. My tire became flat on the expressway, or I just had a conflict with a coworker. And being able to journal gives one that outlet of, you know, it still is important and I'm so missing that person.
In journaling, there are really two practical little things we also would like to recommend to somebody who is grieved. One is to keep it in one volume. Go out and buy a book, but not to put it on little scraps of paper. The reason for that is that way you keep it all in the covers of one book and you can check back and you can see the progress that you've been making over the weeks and the months. The other thing is not to worry about grammar or syntax. Nobody else is going to read this at all.
We've discussed a number of common symptoms of grief. Now, let's examine behaviors we should be concerned about.
Although it's good to seek comfort from your pain, it's unhealthy to numb your pain. This can be done in a variety of ways, some of which may surprise you.
One of the tendencies of a grieving person, because a grieving person is hungry for comfort, is to grab for comfort wherever it's available. And when I'm not careful about where I go for comfort, I actually don't get comfort, and I end up hurting myself.
The easiest thing to do when you're down the dumps, for me, was to eat. And I think some people get busier, some people choose not to eat, and some people choose to eat, and that is just a vicious cycle. I mean, it doesn't make you feel any better, it doesn't make your clothes fit any better, it doesn't make you feel any better about yourself.
The first couple years, I would shop and buy things that didn't mean anything, and I didn't really like them when I got them home, and was like, why did I buy this? Why did I buy 4 pairs of shoes? I don't need 4 pairs of shoes, that sort of thing. And I realized that that wasn't going to bring me comfort, that nothing like that could bring me comfort. And I would eat. I eat too much, and you know, that was another thing. Then I felt bad.
We medicate by activity or by a drug or sex or all the different medications that there are, quote unquote, that really don't work. Genuine grief is a process of dealing with issues head on.
So people start doing all types of things to cover the pain. And really it's better to just endure it, to cry when you need to cry, laugh when you want to laugh, and to really feel it and process it and talk to God about it, talk to others who are supportive of what you're going through about it so that you can get to the other side of it.
For some, the pain of grief becomes so unbearable, they consider suicide.
If you're thinking of taking your life, get help immediately from someone who has been trained in suicide prevention.
I'd also say this, that if you're really having strong thoughts of suicide, or even have just pondered it, especially if you've thought about a plan, that you need to immediately reach out. Those are real strong signs of real intense depression. And depression can be overcome. It can. And God can bring back to your heart renewed vigor. He can bring back to you new strength. He can give you a new song, new hope, and He can work through you to do great good. But you've got to reach out. You've got to reach out right now. And you're right. Most of the people who I've talked to about suicide, it isn't that they hate life. It's that they hate life the way it is. They do. And so what they're looking for is just a little hope, Tim, just a little guidance, a little something to let me know that my life counts, that it even matters. If you take that first step of reaching out, I'd call right now. I'd get a hold of my pastor. I'd call a professional counselor. I'd call 911 if I needed to. And I'd take that first step back to hope and healing and strength all over again.
You may feel there's no reason to live, and I can understand how you might feel that way. But believe me, you can feel good again. There is a reason to live. So if you are suicidal, please speak to someone before going home.
Although we've looked at some of the most common grief symptoms, there are many more than we have time to talk about today. Over the next few weeks, you'll learn about other symptoms.
Also, keep in mind that since everyone's grief is different, you may never experience some of the symptoms we've discussed.
For now, if you're still wondering whether something you are doing or feeling is normal,
talk to your group leader or counselor. If you're concerned about physical symptoms, we encourage you to see your physician.
And speaking of your workbook, don't forget to use it this week. It's another great way to bring comfort to your soul.
The daily exercises will provide spiritual nourishment that you need to make it through each day.
In the next session of Grief Share, we'll share what happens when your spouse dies.
Once he was dead, it was, okay, I don't even know what to do, who to call.
We were just so close to so many couples. And then once he died, the invitations just weren't there.
One of the biggest dangers for people who are single because of the loss of a spouse is that you can become emotionally entangled with somebody and you're not even aware of it.
Don't miss the next session of Grief Share.
Now, if your loss is someone other than your spouse, you should still come to this session. There will be lots of information that you can apply to your circumstances, and it will also help you connect with the friends you're making in your Grief Share group.
Remember, an important part of your healing is the help and support you give others.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.